Well, it's time now for my regular catch-up with girls' and women's rights advocate Kirralie Smith of Binary Australia. Kirralie, welcome back to ADH TV.
Good to see you again, Lyle.
Now, Kirralie, our woke elites continue their relentless quest to sexualise children. This time, the International Commission of Jurists, the ICJ, as part of a United Nations Human Rights Conference, issued a document that contained language which could be interpreted as undermining laws which prohibit sex between adults and minors. Now, this is fiercely denied by the ICJ and the United Nations, so let's look carefully at what was actually said. The ICJ document released on March 8 says this, emphasising that with respect to the application of criminal law in connection with consent, international human rights law requires paying due regard to adolescents' evolving capacity to consent in certain contexts, in fact, even if not in law, when they are below prescribed minimum age of consent in domestic law. It goes on to say, moreover, sexual conduct involving persons below domestically prescribed minimum age of consent to sex may be consensual, in fact, if not in law. In this context, the enforcement of criminal law should reflect the rights and capacity of persons under 18 years of age to make decisions about engaging in consensual consensual sexual conduct and their right to be heard in matters concerning them, pursuant to their evolving capacities and progressive autonomy. Persons under 18 years of age should participate in decisions affecting them with due regard to their age, maturity and best interest, and with specific attention to non-discrimination guarantees, end quote. Now, that was a big quote there, but it's important to get the detail right. Now, this rightly, Kirralie, sparked a furor with the United Nations, walking back what was said in this document at a press conference. A spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General said this, in the application of law, it is realised that criminal sanctions are not appropriate against adolescents of similar ages for consensual, non-exploitive sexual activity, end quote. Now, nowhere in the original ICJ document did the qualifier adolescents of similar ages appear. Kirralie, what are we to make of all this?
Well, look, I think it is very concerning because it's this very slow creep to continually blur the lines of who a child is and what a child can consent to. And we're seeing this even here in Australia, you know, whether it was with vaccine mandates, whether it was with the transgender or transitioning of children without parental knowledge or consent. There's this redefining and reuse of words to classify children as mature minors. And it is all around this issue of consent. And if children are young enough to consent to a sex change or to beginning the transition, or if they're young enough to consent to medical procedures, why wouldn't they be young enough to consent to sexual activity? It's very disturbing, and it's it's something we must consider in terms of parental rights as well, because there is this very deliberate blurring of the lines going on. It's moving the boundary ever so slightly, but they're definitely moving the boundary, and we need to wake up right now and ensure that we enforce the boundaries and protect our children.
Yeah, absolutely, Kirralie. Look, whilst this might not have been the gotcha moment that some conservative media outlets thought it might have been, it does need to be discussed, because a document with such loose wording involving children and sex should never have seen the light of day at a UN conference.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's a very we're seeing it in other pushes in other areas, and we have to be awake and alert to the schemes because they're definitely there. And, you know, what we've seen in the last decade, the last 2, 3, 4 decades is quite alarming in how much opportunity is given to children in this realm. Yeah.